Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for March the 10th, Wednesday, 2021. Let's talk about astroturfing in politics. You know, in the 2016 election, we heard again and again how it was bots, Russian bots, who stole the election for Trump at the behest of Vladimir Putin. And we've heard a lot more about bots since then. Every time, I don't know, some famous woman is criticized, it must be bots. Trump support, all bots. Well, here's an interesting story. You may have heard of a Twitter account called Brooklyn Dad Defiant, which has almost 900,000 followers on Twitter. Typically, you only get to have 900,000 followers on Twitter if you're, well, obviously Twitter must approve you, but you have to be some sort of a celebrity. Who is this fellow? Who is he? Well, I guess we know a little bit more about the fellow that I'm calling a Brooklyn bot compliant. This is a story from Natalie O'Neill at the New York Post. A Joe Biden boosting social media influencer known as Brooklyn Dad Defiant came under fire Wednesday for reportedly failing to disclose that he accepted tens of thousands of dollars from a Democratic Political Action Committee. Majid Padalan. Are there any heritage Americans who are Bidenites or support the Democratic Party? How many of them are left? Not very many, it seems. He has been slammed previously for urging Bernie Sanders to drop out of the 2020 presidential race, allegedly accepted more than $57,000 from a pro-Biden PAC, Really American, last year, according to Refinery29.com, which cited tweets circulating Wednesday. In his Twitter bio, Padayan, or I don't know how it's pronounced, I'll just call him Majid, says he's a senior advisor to the PAC, but followers slammed him for failing to admit that he allegedly got paid to post pro-Biden opinions and theories. Brooklyn Dad being a paid Dem op is pretty unsurprising, as it absolutely does pay to have/promote shitty political opinions in America, one user tweeted. Another added, there's a difference between acknowledging you're a senior advisor to a PAC and acknowledging that you're being paid to influence American voters on social media. Every tweet in the profile should include a paid advertisement disclaimer. Who is this fellow that he would be paid a considerable sum of money to be a senior advisor to a political action committee? Got a long record in politics, does he? Is he a political influencer? Who has been, acclaimed for his thoughts on politics? Doesn't seem that way. So, vendor recipient profile, Majid. Customer payer, Really American PAC, total $57,000.88. Number of payments, 13. First payment, July the 13th, 2020. Last payment, December the 24th, 2020. That's 165 days. So that means he was paid, on average, $346 a day to do pro-Biden shitposting on Twitter. Nice work, if you can get it. In recent months, Majid has frequently tweeted his support for the Biden administration and defended the president for criticism of policies and moves ranging from the rollout of stimulus checks to the fact that he hasn't yet held a solo press conference. He's also known for tweets bashing Donald Trump and the GOP and when the discredited Tara Reade's allegations of sexual assault against Biden last year. Other Twitter users defended him, saying public figures and influencers often get paid to promote content on social media. Am I the only one who doesn't give a shit if Brooklyn Dad and all the others on both sides of the fence get paid to share their opinions? One user wrote, isn't that the goal of all influencers? You see how powerful the influencer movement is. Influencers are shills, paid shills, who go on Instagram and say, oh, look at my pretty blouse, look at my pretty shoes, and here's where you can get them. And for this, they are paid by companies. I guess this is another aspect of politics being taken over by PR spivs. Oh, here is a man and here is his opinion, or a woman, her opinion. Well, no, it's actually not his or her opinion. It's the opinion of whoever is paying this person. Social media influencers, the Post writes, generally disclose when they're getting paid to promote a product or service, other observers said. It wasn't immediately clear if Majid was directly paid to post positive tweets about Biden. He didn't immediately return the Post's requests for comment Wednesday. Well, what else is this guy going to do? Here's a story from the Daily Dot. Twitter users agape over news Brooklyn dad defiant is paid Democratic operative. Although he's always been online, a Brooklyn dad defiant, that is Majid, burst into the national conversation earlier this year when he became dismayed that Phoebe Bridgers decided to smash her guitar while performing on Saturday Night Live. Someone called David Kovucci wrote this story. I don't think that it's true that Majid burst into the national conversation because he criticized someone appearing on Saturday Night Live. But for a subset of the extremely political online, he was already a villain, a centrist liberal, ho-ho, who spent the primary attempting to take down Senator Bernie Sanders and had an undying love for President Joe Biden. From April the 1st, I wish Bernie would just cut the crap and drop out already. It would be nice to not to have to repeat 2016 all over again. It needs to be said. His posts are often considered cringe. And here's one. Joe Biden is going to give America a mommy again. It's what we need. Amen. There seems to be a little confusion amongst the Democrats as to who America's mommy is, because we have heard Kamala Harris been referred to many times as Momala. No, I'm not making this up, and there was a serious attempt to meme this into existence, despite the fact that Kamala Harris is not a mother. But back to the Daily Dot. Leftists have long speculated he was a mainstream Democratic operative using his social media platform to attack the movement, and now they think they have proof of it. But in Brooklyn Dad Defiant's defense, it's less damning than they think. Of course, it always is. The drama started Tuesday night when a Twitter user shared some Federal Election Commission FEC data that showed Majid was receiving money from a liberal PAC. It is a straightforward resistance PAC. Oh, okay. And so Joe Biden is associated with La Résistance, is he? That was not my impression. And though the founder, Justin Horowitz, claims he helped work with Democratic Socialists in the past, really America PAC has been criticized for being anti-left. Many flagged the mainstream corporations' donations the PAC received, including some healthcare organizations deemed oppositional to Medicare for All. And we see donations from JHCH Ventures, Cessa Capital, Autodesk Inc., John Legend Touring, Knight Blanc LLC, Clean Energy Venture Fund, Amazon.com, GE Healthcare, Arium Health's Carolinas Medical Center. Yes, all very oppositional, isn't it? Beth Lynch 2020 tweeted, "It's still good to know who's funding him for his takes, no? Like it might be significant that he's funded by healthcare interests and Google and Amazon and John effing Legend to tweet anti-left policy takes." But back to Brooklyn Dad. Throughout the primary, he drew the ire of the left for his centrist takes, which he blasted to his large audience. I don't know that it would be quite accurate to call them centrist takes. I think it would be more accurate to call them money takes, because Joe Biden is where the money went. And Joe Biden is where the money is going to. And Biden, of course, is paying off the people who put him in office, despite the fact that he is almost 80, physically and mentally decrepit. But the reveal, according to Daily Dot, that he's being paid by Really American PAC is less of a got you than those online think they have. Yes, everything that's in front of your eyes is wrong. FEC data shows Majid's first payment from Early American PAC came in September 2020. Really? September? Okay. I believe that the 7th month of the year is not September. I believe that it is July. But perhaps people at the Daily Dot are not very good at figuring out that sort of thing. Majid tweeted today, just woke up, saw Brooklyn Dad trending because a bunch of folks thought I was hiding information clearly stated in my profile, but even more of you stood up for me. Thank you, guys. Heart symbol. I love you. Heart symbol. And if you go to his Twitter feed today, you will see dozens of similar messages from his simps. There is no FEC data for Majid from earlier in the primary, so unless at the time he was working off the books, he wasn't a paid mainstream Dem dedicated to taking down Sanders. However, his work since taking money has been all over the place, equating January 6 Capitol riots with 9/11 and writing. No, I'll just read the tweet. Okay, this is from January the 11th of this year. I disagree with Angela Merkel, who thinks that banning Trump's Twitter accounts was problematic. If Hitler had Twitter back then, the Holocaust would have been much, much worse. So if Hitler had Twitter, he would have been able to meme the Jews dead? Is that the idea? It almost beggars imagination how someone as, I don't know, worthless as Brooklyn Dad can have 900,000 Twitter followers and being paid, I don't know, what, $15,000 a month or somewhere between $12,000 and $15,000 a month for Twitter tweets. According to the authoritative heavy.com, let's see what they say about him. He says he's a senior advisor for the Really American PAC, but it's unclear whether he specifically receives compensation for his tweets. Yes, he wrote an illustrated book with absolutely terrible illustrations called The Littlest President, which apparently got to be #1 on Amazon for political humor. And of course, it's completely unknown for political organizations to buy up massive copies of books in order to make it shoot up in the Amazon rankings. According to the Center for Responsive Politics, which tracks political fundraising and spending, Really American was launched to support liberal policies. It is not affiliated with any specific candidate, according to its website. The organization spends most of its money on negative advertisements, according to the Center for Responsive Politics. During the 2019 to 2020 election cycle, Really American spent more than $900,000 on ads that were focused on opposing Republican candidates. By comparison, $135,000 was spent to support Democrats. As of this writing, the homepage of Really American's website included an advertisement titled "Cancel Cancun Cruise." The ad accuses Cruz of abandoning Texans who lost power and running water during a severe winter storm. Majid has tweeted support for Really American's advertising effort against Cruz. Heavy has reached out to Majid for comment about the online controversy. We also reached out to Really American. This post will be updated once we hear back. Majid sells Brooklyn Dad merchandise. Oh, how about that? He sells clothing, mugs, and tote bags adorned with his logo and images from his published book. Yes, and I suppose it would be clearly impossible for any political actors to astroturf that sort of things as well. Majid provided a summarized explanation on the site to explain why he started the Brooklyn Dad Twitter account. Over the past few years, Brooklyn Dad has built a strong, loyal social media following that stemmed from his passion in sharing his thoughts and knowledge and for truth talking, whilst rebuking naysayers about the U.S. political climate and its key and corrupt figures. Whilst rebuking naysayers about the U.S. political climate. That is pretty fancy English writing. But more than this, BDD has brought together a vast community with a shared belief that we are a good America and that we must protect it from bad hombres like the man baby Spanky McDumass currently squatting in the White House. Squatting in the White House. This rather suggests that Trump was not legitimately elected in 2016. Once again, I must say that it is most curious that all of those people who on Twitter and Facebook and other social media insisted that Trump was not legitimately elected president of the United States were not deplatformed. Because as we know, it is not possible to steal presidential elections in the United States of America. That has been made official by YouTube and Google and Twitter and other organizations. Here's something else that's most curious. The Stacey Abrams, after having losing the election for governor in Georgia in 2018, insisted for months afterwards that the election had been stolen from her and that she was the legitimate governor of Georgia. Was she deplatformed? No. She was praised to the skies. It's you look at something like that and then you understand who is part of the elite and who is not part of the elite. Majid explained within its pages, this is his so-called humor book, that it came to fruition while he was sitting in his vehicle at his daughter's track meet. He wrote that the book was meant to be a parody based on a real timeline, and then he intended for it to boost morale and bring a little laughter during a very dark and stressful time in American history. Majid is a self-employed graphic designer. Okay. So apparently he's not any kind of political wizard, opinion wizard. According to his LinkedIn site, his site lists skills including print production, logo creation, and brand management. Well, people like that are a dime a dozen. And why would a political PAC reach out to such a person? Okay, let's go to the chat. It's all bots all the way down. Hello to Ezra St. White and Dan Pelcasso 88. Milo has apparently gone straight. Yeah. Okay, I'll have something to say about that a little later. Chogokin 666, Corgi and Bess, an opera of Meghan and the Queen. Random number generator says no well-adjusted white person supports the American left. Hello to our valiant moderator, Chad Chadson. Thank you for your service. Chogokin 666 says people walking outside on a sunny spring day wearing 2 masks think you're crazy. Steve cites the feminization of politics. Well, yeah. Speaking of things that are curious, Joe Biden, he's the nice guy president. A return to, the hope and change years of Barack Obama. Biden is an exceedingly nasty person and has been such through his entire political life. And yet we were gaslighted to believe, despite copious evidence to the contrary in the 2020 election, that old Joe was just nicer than nice. He likes ice cream. Can you imagine that? That's a really rare attribute amongst Americans, that they love ice cream. And apparently he loves dogs. But maybe they don't like him so much. We have 2 dog violence incidents associated with the Biden presidency already, but more on that later. Mamala is what Harris is called by her stepchildren. Sure she is, says Jim Smith. Okay, random number generator 2021. People simp for men now. Ugh. Hello to Hikma Warrior. And let's see if there's anyone. Quachulango says, everyone seems attuned, but gullible. Attuned to what, I wonder? Hikma Warrior says, by the way, I went to a Catholic bookstore and bought a rosary. It is said to be effective against demonic influence, Mary being the one who crushed the serpent in Catholic lore. Well, it's not a religious totem. I'll say that. Joe Biden apparently wears it as a piece of jewelry, which that is not its purpose. Wasn't it Madonna who started that in the 1980s? Yakorai Paula says, commenting on Milo Greek name may be the one opportunity in the history of YouTube to suggest that a gay marriage was probably fake from the beginning, and he was probably running around having random sex. Ricardo Williams says, I find it interesting that they don't crow more about Kamala being the first female VP. I don't know. It's I was going to say it's a useful job worth a pitcher of warm piss, as John Nance Garner infamously said. It was pretty powerful under Dick Cheney, unconstitutionally so. Now we hear that Kamala is talking to foreign leaders without Biden on the line. Apparently, Kamala is going to be trotted out on some sort of, yes, I'm taking over soon tour. I don't know whether this is prudent. You know, if the plug has to be pulled on Biden, let's say before Midsummer's Day, tens of millions of Americans are going to be absolutely furious. Why? Well, because they were set up. It was a stitch up from the beginning. There's supposed to be more transparency in politics now. Claire Booth Luce, that witty American woman, got into a lot of trouble in 1944 when FDR was running for his fourth term, pointing out the obvious fact that he was dying. But you weren't supposed to say that about presidents. And of course, you know, having a dying president while World War II was going on, a little dangerous. And Roosevelt did die, in March of April of 1945. But no, if the plug is pulled on Biden, then the Democratic Party will be accused, quite rightfully, of pushing past the finish line someone who was obviously not fit to become president of the United States. Enron says all good people like dogs, Kevin. Well, I'm not taking any stand on that. I'm just saying that Joe seems to be rather unlucky in that regard. Adam says, how would stock market react to Biden stepping down? Who knows how the stock market would react to anything, actually. William Hicks says the Dems pulled the old bait and switch. The plan is for Kamala to take over from the start. Wonder who her VP will be. Well, Stacey Abrams, of course. Palcasso88 says Lena Dunham no longer supports Biden. He wouldn't share his chocolate chip ice cream with her. A random number generator says she's just disgusting in every way imaginable. Just that horrible fake laugh, which we see always at any event that she is part of. She's just so giddy all the time. Steve says, can the oligarchs control Kamala? I think that she's been controlled right from the very beginning. Let's talk. Before we go into that, we have more cancel culture news. And I suppose it gets sadder and sadder. I'm not really familiar with the band Mumford and Sons. I knew that they were a big deal. This is from Paul Joseph Watson at Summit News. Mumford and Sons guitarist was forced to issue a groveling apology after he was labeled a Nazi merely for praising a book by journalist Andy Ngo, which is critical of Antifa. The controversy began over the weekend when Marshall tweeted about the book, Unmasked, inside Antifa's radical plan to destroy democracy. When the musician told No, congratulations to Mr. Andy No, finally had the time to read your important book. You're a brave man. For this egregious act of daring to express an original thought as a celebrity, Marshall was immediately pounced upon by the Twitter mob, who labeled him a Nazi shitbag, amongst other insults. The guitarist deleted his original tweet, but it wasn't enough. The mob demanded that Marshall recant his thought crime, and he duly obliged in the most pathetic fashion. This is what he tweeted. Over the past few days, I have come to better understand the pain caused by the book I endorsed. I've offended not only a lot of people I don't know, but also those closest to me, including my bandmates, and for that I am truly sorry. As a result of my actions, I am taking time away from the band to examine my blind spots. For now, please know that I realize how my endorsements have the potential to be viewed as approvals of hateful, divisive behavior. I apologize, as this was not at all my intention. He has stepped away from the band in order to indulge in some thinking about his behavior. Yes, this is what he has actually said. Paul Joseph Watson says, quite how anyone thinks it's controversial to be critical of Antifa, a disgusting, violent extremist group that routinely attacks innocent people, including the disabled, is anyone's guess. Antifa is perhaps the most hateful and divisive organization in existence, although they'd face stiff competition from Black Lives Matter. Indeed, a recent poll found that a full 71% of Americans think Antifa is a domestic terror group. Respondents to Marshall's pitiful apology let him know the cowardly nature of his behavior. It is worse, in the cases like this, it is always worse to say something and then apologize. If you're not willing to take the abuse, keep your mouth shut. You are just making it worse for the rest of us. So he's stepped away from Mumford and Sons because he has offended those closest to him, including his bandmates. I don't know the nature of the contract that this fellow has with Mumford and Sons, Inc. But I would suggest that maybe he should have looked for the Piers Morgan deal, which is, oh, you're determined to get rid of me, are you? You're going to have to buy me out. And given, our popularity, this is going to cost you. It's going to cost you millions of dollars, or it's going to cost you a permanent cut of all of the subsequent records that you make. You want to litigate this? Wouldn't be good for sales. Yeah. It's always worse. From the U.S. Sun, Disney Plus has stripped its children's movie selection of classic movies like Dumbo, The Aristocats, and Peter Pan because of their racist stereotypes. Settings on the streaming site's app will deter children from watching the once loved, now controversial title. On the Stories Matter section of their website, Disney explained why each iconic movie was being pulled. For Dumbo, they explained that the crows and musical number pay homage to racist minstrel shows where white performers with blackened faces and tattered clothing imitated and ridiculed enslaved Africans on southern plantations. Is that what they did? The leader of the group in Dumbo is Jim Crow, which shares the name of laws that enforce racial segregation in the southern United States. And for Peter Pan, they stated that the film portrays Native people in a stereotypical manner, which reflects neither the diversity of Native peoples nor their authentic cultural traditions. Oh dear, I suppose that means that every Western ever made has to be canceled now. Let's see. Authentic cultural traditions of American Indians. There are many authentic cultural traditions, including slavery and cannibalism. Now, we want to talk about diversity. Why don't we talk about that? Why don't we talk about slavery? But no, Indians good, white people bad. It shows them speaking in an unintelligible language, just as the Indian languages of the American Indians were unintelligible to most Americans, and repeatedly refers to them as Redskins, an offensive term. Peter and the Lost Boys engage in dancing, wearing headdresses and other exaggerated tropes. Oh, the Indians didn't dance? They didn't have a ghost dance? They didn't wear headdresses? They didn't wear war paint? Meanwhile, for the beloved aristocrats, they said the Siamese cat Shungan is depicted as a racist caricature of East Asian peoples with exaggerated stereotypical traits such as slanted eyes and buck teeth. Siamese cats have slanted eyes already. Okay. And so we have dealt with cancel culture. Let's move on to what is funny and what is not. Steve Saylor comments on a piece in the Washington Post from Richard Zoglin called "Comedians Are Struggling to Parody Biden. Let's Hope This Doesn't Last." Zoglin is the author of, most recently, Elvis in Vegas, How the King Reinvented the Las Vegas Show. The first crisis of the Biden administration could be looming. America may have a president, the first in generations, who is impervious to impressionists. Oh, they've tried. Yeah, both of these statements are untrue. Steve Saylor points out that the second one is untrue, but the first one is untrue already. SNL cast member Alex Moffat is the show's latest Biden, but after one appearance, he seems to be missing in action. The late-night comics have barely tried, and where were the YouTube parodies? This cannot be good for the country. Well, they had Jim Carrey impersonating Joe Biden, and lefties were screaming in outrage over this. And I think one of the reasons is that Carrey's impersonation pointed to two things about Biden, which are fairly obvious. That one, he sees himself as some sort of hipster, some sort of, I don't know, Dobie Gillis era hipster. And two, that a lot of the time he seems half insane, at least. Back to the Post, Biden so far has been impregnable. The voice is too bland and devoid of obvious quirks, and beyond the occasional, come on, man, his conversational manner too muted and self-effacing to give the parodists much to work with. Trump supporters and Fox News pundits would undoubtedly attribute this to the media's liberal bias. And to be sure, Trump was viewed by the mostly liberal satirists. Oh, are there any others? Not just as an irresistible comic target, but also as a dire threat to the nation. Biden's pleasantly boring presidency has become a welcome return to normality. Oh, has it now? Job number one, force transgender athletes on high school and college teams. That's definitely a return to normality. Have a cabinet minister state, under oath in testimony, that Washington, D.C., that Metro D.C. does not belong to the United States of America. That's definitely a return to normality. But I digress. Steve Saylor comments, what could be funny about the fact that Biden is so old that his sense of what is cool permanently congealed roughly the day JFK was elected president, so that he talks like Ed Cookie Burns, the greaser valet Parker in the 1958 detective show 77 Sunset Strip, whose lingo was a cross among beatnik, candy-colored tangerine flake, streamlined baby car guy, and strategic air command pilot. What could be funny about what Tom Stoppard called in travesties the cheap comedy of senile confusion? What could be funny about Sleepy Joe trying to be woke by announcing insane stuff about transgenderism and how the black man invented the light bulb? What could be funny about Biden's tendency to point out alt-right sounding observations like Jews control the media and Indian immigrants are taking over America, but then saving himself by announcing, but that's a good thing? What could be funny about an inner circle of Kamala Harris, Dr. Jill Biden, and Hunter Biden? What could be funny about the Great Awakening producing the president who is the living embodiment of the woke complaint, Lord, grant me the confidence of a mediocre white man? Yeah, Hunter Biden, should be a lot of grist for the mill there. But no. You see, he's had struggles, Hunter Biden has. He's had struggles with addiction. And of course, we never make fun of people for being drunks and or drug addicts. That never, ever happens. No. We would never, make fun of the son of the president of the United States who had his own Pornhub account. I remember Jimmy Carter's brother, Billy, being savaged, and Jimmy Carter, by implication, being savaged because Billy was a little goofy, good old boy from the South. He had his own beer, Billy beer. One would think that this is all fair game, but no, the media left Barack Obama alone. There is so much that is deeply weird about that man. Nicholas Sticks called him, what he called the man called who calls himself John Doe, or the John Doe who calls himself Barack Obama. Yes, it wasn't until 2008 that we actually learned his full legal name, Barack Hussein Obama II. All of the mystery about this man, the fact that he grew up in Hawaii and in Indonesia, which is not very American places to grow up. How about the Reverend Jeremiah Wright? Oh, no, people are carrying on as if I was very close to this man. I really had no idea his hatefulness. Well, how long were you in his congregation for? 20 years? Weren't you introduced to your wife by him or his circle? Didn't he marry you? What, you just sat there in the pews every week and just zoned out while he went into his black liberation theology? How about Barack Obama accepting a Nobel Peace Prize shortly after becoming president when he had done nothing? Or how about this? Let's see. Barack Obama has a bossy, strident bodybuilder wife who boasted that she made Barack look after the children, early in the morning. Why? So she could sleep in another hour, say? That's what a normal woman would do. No, she went to the gym at 5 o'clock in the morning to work on building up her triceps. Let's see, 2 daughters, no sons. Are you seeing a theme here? Valerie Jarrett running the show. A mother-in-law living in the White House. This is all comedy gold, and yet the satirist didn't dare touch it. By the way, how many of Barack Obama's Kenyan relatives are currently living in the United States? One of them was reported to be on welfare in the Boston area a few years ago. And then there's the brother who turned on him rather savagely. There's also something, I suppose you couldn't make these kind of jokes at all anymore, but you could still make them when Barack Obama was president, and jokes pointing to his manliness or the lack of it. Barack Obama is clearly a fey, one might say, individual. Here's a piece going back to 2013 by Mark Judge at the Daily Caller. Condolences to Hillary Clinton, who wanted to be the first woman president. She just missed it. Outrageous. But I'll get back to that. Barack Obama is the first female president. And no, it's not because President Obama doesn't hunt or drink a lot of beer or curse and belch. As I've written before, quoting H.L. Mencken, every great man has a streak of woman in him. Find me an obviously intelligent man, Mencken wrote in defense of women. A man free of sentimentality and illusion, a man hard to deceive, a man of the first class, and I'll show you a man with a wide streak of woman in him. Examples: Lincoln, Goethe, Bonaparte, Bismarck, Shakespeare, JFK. The problem is Barack Obama doesn't have just a streak of the feminine in him. He seems to be a woman, and a feminist one at that, with a streak of man in him. I first noticed this in watching Obama's reaction to terrorism. No matter how bland or professorial a man is, there comes a moment when his family or his country is threatened and he shows rage and the desire to kill. You can see it in his eyes, that flare of hatred, the primal urge to eradicate those who would poison your tribe. One saw this in both Roosevelt's, in JFK during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and in Reagan when talking about communism's evil empire. George Bush showed it standing in the rubble of 9/11. In their book, Manvotionals, Timeless Wisdom and Advice on Living the Seven Manly Virtues, Brett and Kate McKay outline 6 things necessary to attain true manhood: courage, industry, resolution, self-reliance, discipline, honor, and manliness. Okay, let's see. You can say, okay, the right hated Obama, and so they would say outrageous things such as Barack Obama is the first female president. Oh, I should mention this. The only decent comedy that I saw about Barack Obama came from an American comedian who's been resident in Britain for quite a few years. When Barack ran for president the first time in 2008, there was a discussion in the Black American community whether he was Black enough, because he is not a descendant of slaves. And so they were talking about this on the British panel show, Have I Got News for You? The question came up, is Barack Obama Black enough? And this Black American comedian said, well, his father buggered off as soon as he was born. Is that Black enough for you? I suppose that joke would cut a little too close to the bone for any American comedian. But the American Prospect is not a right-wing site. Here's what Dana Goldstein wrote on June the 16th, 2008. Is Barack Obama a woman? It's certainly true, as Susan Faludi writes in the New York Times, that Republicans are already using coded language to call Barack Obama effeminate. To his credit, Obama has so far done a good job of refusing to outswagger McCain on foreign policy. He has also resisted engaging in the other stupid gender role-playing games that are routinely part of the American presidential politics. Think motorcycle and tank riding, donning flight suits, going duck hunting, and the like. And yes, Obama was raised by a single mom and has a smart, ambitious wife. But let's not get carried away. All of this doesn't make Obama our first woman president. Faludi writes, in many ways, he really will be the first woman president. Megan Byer of Virginia, a charter member of Women for Obama, told reporters. An op-ed essay in the New York Post headlined, Bam, our first woman pres, came to a similar conclusion, if a tad more snidely. Those shots of Barack and Michelle sitting with Oprah on stools had the feel of a smart, all-woman talk panel. Remember how disturbing it seemed once an actual Black person was in the reach of the presidency, that Bill Clinton had so internalized the first Black president moniker that he was shocked African Americans would flock to Obama instead of to his wife. Well, no sooner is Hillary Clinton out of the race than we're hearing that Obama would be the first woman president. Utterly ridiculous. It's time to retire this trope. But people on the left were talking about it, and some people on the left were pushing it as if it were a good thing. Again, Barack Obama, certainly as mockable a president as Donald Trump, but there was no mockery. None whatsoever. I suppose because, he was the chosen one, and also because it would be, infra-dig. You just can't do that. You cannot make fun of Barack Obama. It's a sin. It would be a sin to do so. This is from Kate Bennett at CNN. Biden's German Shepherd has aggressive incident and is sent back to Delaware. Two sources with knowledge tell CNN. Major, who was adopted by Biden in November 2018 from a Delaware animal shelter, had what one of the people described as a biting incident with a member of White House security. The exact condition of the victim is unknown. However, the episode was serious enough that the dogs were subsequently moved to Wilmington, where they remain. On Tuesday, White House Press Secretary not Jennifer, but Jen Psaki, confirmed Major caused an injury to an unnamed individual. Champ and Major are still getting acclimated and accustomed to their surroundings and new people. And on Monday, the first family's younger dog, Major, was surprised by an unfamiliar person and reacted in a way that resulted in a minor injury to the individual, said Psaki, who added the injury was handled by the White House Medical Unit. Major, who is 3 years old and is the younger of the two Biden dogs, has been known to display agitated behavior on multiple occasions, including jumping, barking, and charging at staff and security, according to the people CNN spoke with about the dog's demeanor at the White House. Yeah, okay. You get two big dogs like that, you better train them, because, German Shepherd can kill someone. Playtime with Major was the culprit of Joe Biden's November foot injury, which resulted in hairline fractures and the wearing of a corrective boot. There's something comedians could make fun of. That whole ridiculous story, which is so reminiscent of Hillary Clinton and the Barack Obama administration. How did you injure your foot? Something about coming out of the shower wet and pulling at a dog's tail? Yeah, that's almost as good as Susan Rice's whopper about, the Benghazi thing. That was some YouTube video that no one saw. That was what was responsible for it. Okay. All right. Some reporter talked about whether the dog was going to be euthanized. Again, when we're talking about the Joe Biden, it's a little too close to the bone. Is it not? I don't think they want to hear that word, euthanasia, at the White House. So let's go back to the chat. I call the big one Bitey. This is Homer Simpson. Yes, I remember that. From G's Heastal. Okay, if only he had bitten a scumbag journalist, says Ann Run. Okay, now we have a discussion about Kemal Ataturk. Yeah, curious thing about Obama that his family, him, his mother, the family that raised him, why? Well, connected to the CIA. One would think that the media might have made a little more than that. That and Peter Geithner was Stanley Ann Dunham's boss, says Gandalf White the second. Obama's mother worked for U.S. Aid, which is frequently used as a front for CIA operations, says Tom Anderson. So, okay. Let's, Metal Mike says Michelle O wears the pants in the family. You all saw that picture of the two of them in a kayak with Barack Obama, not helping, and Michelle with her massive arms propelling that vehicle through the water. That was pretty amusing. She was, Michelle Obama talking about her husband during 2008 about him farting. Who says that about their husband in public on national TV? Or he couldn't make breakfast? What? So she took her husband's running for president, so she saw an opportunity to get revenge on him for some petty slights in the past. Gandalf White says, Z-Man had a great article about this. The right doesn't view the left as evil, while the left declares holy war on the right every day. Exactly true. Palcasso 88 says, with a few exceptions, e.g. Bill Hader, SNL has not been funny since Norm Macdonald was fired for mocking O.J. Simpson. Jaakko Raipala, our Finnish friend, says, of course, our useless right wing makes the same grift over this. Look at the double standard. Leftists are hypocrites. Yeah, they have the power. Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. And I suggested before, there is one thing that people on the right can do about this. We have to be nice to the people who are trying to destroy us, who are actually trying to destroy us. No, we don't have to be nice to them at all. And, if I was ever in eyesight of any of these people, they'd get this from me. Okay. So let's go back to James Burnham and Vilfredo Pareto from the book The Machiavellians. And here Pareto talks about social utility. Burnham begins, since the beginning of systematic thought, that is for about 2,500 years in Western culture, there has been constant discussion of the problem of the good community, the ideal society, the best form of government. Tens of thousands of persons have given time and intelligence to arguments over these questions and have devised nearly as many answers. After all this while, men have not reached any generally accepted conclusions, and there is no indication that we have advanced in these matters a single step beyond the reasonings of the ancient Greeks and Romans. This fact, and the contrast it presents to the advances made in solving the problems of the physical sciences, are enough to show that the attempted answers to these questions are not scientifically credible theories, but non-logical expressions, that is to say, derivations. Derivations, not being subject to the controls of logic, clarity, and evidence, never reach any objective stability, but come and go with every shift of sentiment and cultural fashion. Well, some time ago, back on Luke Ford's old stream, I reviewed John Gray's book, 7 Types of Atheism. And we see with the progressives, the left, the Whigs, whatever you want to call them, that their worldview is essentially a religious one, kind of debased monotheism. That, oh, yes, history has a purpose and it's always bending towards justice. And we are getting closer, ever closer to perfection, except that the United States is more wicked than it has ever been. And the white people are irredeemably wicked. There seem to be some contradictions there in the Whig interpretation of history. But back to Burnham, disputes over the best form of society and government can be interpreted in terms of the notion of social utility. When we were asking whether some law or economic measure or belief or war or revolution will be best for society, we are wondering if it will contribute to the community's welfare or utility. In connection with the idea of social utility, Pareto makes certain distinctions which help to clarify what is meant by this type of problem. To begin with, it may be readily observed that a community, a nation, for example, is heterogeneous. It is not composed of identical elements, but subdivided into various groups and classes, rulers and ruled in one rough way, but with many more intricate and elaborate divisions, economic classes, religious sects, and so on. Ordinarily, the philosophers, reformers, and social writers speak of the community or the society, but these are vague and distant abstractions. It is to be expected, and it is ordinarily the case, that any given proposal should be useful to some subgroups of the community and detrimental to others. A benefit to the ruler is a detriment to the ruled, good for the workers, but hurtful to employers. The spokesmen for the various groups never, of course, put things in this distinct way. They make use of derivations and always put a program, the consequences of which would be favorable to their own group, forward in the name of the community as a whole. From this habit, not a little confusion results. A war wherein defeat would result in death or enslavement for the whole population is directly related to the welfare of the entire community. But in modern times, this is usually not what happens as a result of defeat in war. At least some sections of the defeated communities prosper even in and through the defeat. More plainly, in the case of such measures as tariffs and subsidies, it is pointless to speak of the community as a whole. There are benefits for some sections, hurts for others. It is by no means true, to take a prominent current example, that inflation harms everyone. A certain amount of inflation under certain circumstances can, by stimulating the economy, help nearly everyone. More usually, inflations harm some groups, those living on relatively fixed incomes, and aid others, those whose incomes vary easily or who are expert speculators and manipulators. Does force contribute to social utility? The general question is meaningless. We must first determine what force is under discussion, to be used by whom and against whom and for what purposes. Force used against the state and the ruling class, for instance, is very different in its effects from force used by the state and the ruling class. But even a proper analysis in terms of subgroups and classes will not sufficiently clarify the meaning of utility, that is to say, welfare and happiness. We must, in Pareto's language, distinguish further between the utility of a community and the utility for a community. By the utility of a community, Pareto refers to what might be called the community's survival value, its strength and power of resistance as against other communities. But the utility for a community, Pareto means its internal welfare, the happiness and satisfaction of its members. The first of these may be objectively studied. We can observe whether the community endures in its struggles with external rivals or is overthrown and disappears as a separate community. The second utility, however, is purely subjective or relative, since what is internally useful for the community will depend upon what the community's members want, what they regard as constituting happiness and satisfaction. Granted that we accept some particular conception of internal utility, material prosperity would be suitable in the case of most modern nations, we must note that these two utilities, the internal and the external utility, seldom coincide. Those factors which give a community survival value, strength, and endurance as against other communities are usually not the factors that can contribute most to the happiness of its members. And I suppose we could see this in the growth of the consumer society, that as we have become consumers and not citizens, we see the decline in community, and we see a deprecation of the notion of community itself and an embrace of so-called multiculturalism. Burnham continues, there are many fairly obvious examples of this divergence. Lengthy and adequate war preparations absorb time, require a discipline most men find unpleasant, and reduce the volume of material goods available for current satisfaction. Nevertheless, they greatly increase the utility of the community. Also, large numbers of children usually increase the utility of the community, its survival value against other communities, at least up to the limit of the physical means for subsistence. However, in many cases, they decrease the pleasures and satisfactions of the constituent members of the community. In general, measures which provide more adequately for the strength of the community in the future, especially in a future some years or generation distant, diminish the satisfactions of the existing generation. Well, yes, they diminish the satisfactions of the existing generation if one looks at them in purely material or status terms. Burnham continues, which then is better, a shorter historical life for the community to end in its destruction with more internal satisfactions as it goes along, or a longer life with fewer satisfactions? This seems to be frequently, perhaps always, the choice, and I would argue that it's the choice that we're looking at now. The answer, Burnham says, needless to say, is never given by deliberate logical decision, and it may be that there is no way in which this question could be objectively answered. Let us turn to another fundamental question raised by the problem of social utility. There are in every community prevailing norms or standards of conduct embodied in customs, codes, laws, moral philosophies, and religions. By various devices ranging from the automatic pressure of social approval and disapproval through education to physical force, each individual member of the community is called upon to observe these standards. As usual, men are not content merely to try to bring about conformity. There must be a theory to explain why the individual ought to conform. That is, there must be a derivation. This type of derivation is the substance of most systems of ethics or moral philosophy. Yes, when one looks at this in terms of, say, Black Lives Matter, it's troublesome because white people are not being offered very much here. Why must we, ought we conform to Black Lives Matter? If we are going to be called white supremacists, white nationalists, white devils even, and that's where we are now, What advantage is there to us of conforming? Obviously, the quislings are going to derive a benefit from this, but there's only, a limited number that can benefit, because I suppose everyone who is not Black Lives Matter could decide to be a quisling or a petanist about this if you wish, but then it would mean that the whole of white people would be absolved from their devil status, which would rob Black Lives Matters of its raison d'etre. Burnham continues, the question suggested by the facts is, does an individual in truth realize a maximum happiness for himself by conforming to the prevailing standards of his community? If the community norm says to be honest, patriotic, faithful in marriage, is it true that an individual member of the community will be happier by not stealing, by sacrificing his life in war, by foregoing adultery? The overwhelming majority of moral philosophies unite in holding that these things indeed are true, that the individual best secures his own private happiness by conforming to his community standards. By a careful analysis, Pareto shows that the reasonings of the moral philosophies are almost without exception derivations, depending upon those non-scientific devices briefly outlined in the preceding section. There is never, or almost never, an objective examination of the facts themselves, but a reliance upon vagueness, ambiguity, empty abstraction, and sentiment. And it should nevertheless appear that some miscreant seems happy, though he lives a life of wickedness, self-indulgence, and disregard for duty, then the philosophers tell us that this is only appearance and that he is not really happy. There are a few philosophies, in contrast, that take a pessimistic view. They deny that the individual secures his own happiness by following the standards of the group. These philosophies, too, are derivations. Such pessimistic solutions count for little in this social equilibrium. They are never popular. They have vogue primarily among men of letters and philosophers, and are valuable only as manifestations of the psychic state of this or that individual. In moments of discouragement, many people repeat, as we saw with Brutus, virtue thou art but a name. Oftentimes, pessimism acts as a spur to material enjoyments, and many people of literary inclinations will repeat the maxim, let us eat, drink, and marry, for tomorrow we die. In Russia, after the war with Japan, there was a movement for revolution with eager hopes of an exciting future. The revolution was put down, the hopes were dispelled. A period of discouragement followed, with a marked impulse towards purely physical enjoyments. One can see that in the United States, and to a lesser extent elsewhere in the Western world, with the failure of the revolutions of 1968. We see a turn beginning very strongly, I suppose, after Kent State in 1970, towards people becoming Sybarites. Yes, let's expand ourselves to the fullest. Let's expand our mind. Let's expand our pleasure. Let's see how far we can go in our individuality, because it was seen then that the group approach was not availing. Burnham continues, what is the truth about this problem apart from derivations? The truth seems to be that no general conclusion can be drawn. Sometimes the individual best secures his own happiness by conforming to the group's standards, sometimes by disregarding or violating the standards. It all depends upon the individual in question and upon the circumstances. Nevertheless, though this is the truth, it would, generally speaking, be disadvantageous to society for this truth to be known. Almost always it is socially useful, it contributes to social welfare, to have people believe that their own individual happiness is bound up with acceptance of the community standards, or as moral philosophers put it, that there is a direct correspondence between the welfare of the individual and the welfare of society. At the time that Burnham wrote this book in the early 1940s, sexual license, if you will, was circumscribed, very much so. There was no birth control pill. Contraception was illegal in many jurisdictions. So women generally had several children, whether they truly wanted to or not. Since 1960, it's been possible for women to reduce the number of children that they bear to, well, 0, if they wish. And I suppose it should be possible to use the tools of sociology to determine whether women are happier in a state where they have few children or whether they have relatively many. Burnham continues, here, however, we have reached a principle with much wider application than to this particular problem. Is the truth, or rather a knowledge of the truth, always advantageous to society? Is falsehood or nonsense always harmful? To both of these questions, the facts compel us to answer no. The great rationalistic dream of modern times, believing that social actions are or can be primarily logical, has taught the illusion that the true and the good are identical, that if men knew the truth about themselves and their social and political life, then society would become even better, and that falsehood and absurdity always hurt social welfare. But things do not stand in that simple way. Sometimes the truth aids society, but often a widespread knowledge of the truth may weaken or destroy sentiments, habits, attitudes upon which the integrity of social life, above all in times of crisis, may depend. False beliefs do sometimes produce evil social results, but they often also benefit the community. Again, no general conclusion is possible. We must examine each concrete case, each specific truth and falsehood in its specific circumstances. We are not therefore entitled to judge that it is invariably a bad thing that men believe derivations, ideologies, myths, formulas, these verbal constructions which from a scientific standpoint always contain a large measure of the false and the absurd. The myths are, in the first place, a necessary ingredient of social life. A society in which they would be eliminated in favor of exclusively scientific beliefs would have nothing in common with the human societies that have existed and do exist in the real world, and is merely an imaginary fantasy. Here once more, our investigation must be concrete. Certain derivations or myths under certain circumstances are socially useful, others detrimental. When the circumstances change, so may the effects of the myths. The doctrine of the divine right of kings is scientifically ridiculous. From this, it does not follow that it would always be better if men understood that it was ridiculous, nor that a belief in it always hurts society. The democratic ideology is equally ridiculous from the point of view of scientific truth. Belief in it may, nevertheless, in one historical context, greatly aid, and in another, gravely injure the welfare of society. Society is not so simple as a problem in mathematics, which is fully solved once ignorance is overcome. Not only is it impossible that all men should know the scientific truth about society and act in accordance with this knowledge, it is far from clear that this would improve society even if it were possible. Those who believe that all social difficulties could be overcome if the truth about society were known recognize only one tie or obstacle: ignorance. Ignorance being eliminated, they have no doubt that society will follow the course they think is the best. The tie of ignorance may legitimately be said to have been suppressed, at least in great part. For it is certain that there are educated people in our time, just as there have been educated people in the past. And in society as a whole, knowledge has increased in the course of the ages. So far, therefore, no obstacle blocks our path, but one rises insuperable in that part of the argument which holds that the tie of ignorance is the only tie that has to be removed before the conclusion is possible. If the most intelligent people we know, the best educated, to use a current term, were also the people who make most extensive use of logico-experimental or scientific principles in social matters to the exclusion of all other principles, it would be legitimate to conclude that in the course of time, such people would reject everything of a non-experimental character, and that other people, more or less their equals in knowledge, would also be more or less like them in their exclusive acceptance of logico-experimental principles. But the facts do not stand that way. If theologians have diminished in number among our educated people and lost much of their power, metaphysicians, properly so called, are still prospering and enjoying fame and influence, to say nothing of those metaphysicists who call themselves positivists, or under some other name are merrily overstepping the boundaries of the logical experimental. Many scientists who are supremely great in the natural sciences, where they use the logical experimental principles exclusively, or almost so, forget them entirely when they venture into the social sciences. As regards the masses in the large, what one observes is an unending alternation of theologies and systems of metaphysics, rather than any reduction in the total number of them. Well, just so. suppose it's a current scientific belief that the universe is stochastic, that it's completely random. We're just atoms bouncing around. And if you believe in Richard Dawkins, well, there's no such thing as free will. We are programmed to act as we do. The selfish gene rules all. So essentially, life is meaningless. The old view, the Christian view, if you were, was that life did have meaning. And I suppose, once again, it would be possible to make observations as to the behavior of people, say in the recent past, where the old metaphysics is still obtained versus the new metaphysics. But this always comes down to theology of a sort. Once again, Black Lives Matter is a theology. The belief in human rights is a theology. The belief in equality, or latterly equity, is a theology. None of these things can be proved. Tomorrow, we'll begin talking about Pareto's views on the circulation of the elites. And I'm going to return to the chat. We're talking about Bulgarian folk music now. Okay. I'm reading about the Aeolian mode, which is believed to be Greek, says Halper. Okay. Okay, now we're talking about cyclists. I saw a hurt cyclist writhing on the sidewalk today, kept going, other simps helped. Most spandex cyclists are, there's a nasty word here. Bicycles are not supposed to be on the sidewalks. And we have, in my city of Victoria, at very great expense and to the great inconvenience of both pedestrians and car drivers, introduced dedicated bike lanes, and they have their own lights now. And yet I continually see people, including adults, riding bicycles on the sidewalk, which is a danger to pedestrians. Yes, I don't know. This is, people spend more time walking than any other method of propulsion. Everyone is a pedestrian at some time, but it's strange to me. For instance, if you're in a parking lot, a supermarket or a mall, you'll frequently have to, jump out of the way of some car which is driving too fast or has turned a corner. And I think, don't those people realize that after they park their car, they are going to have to, undertake the same journey to the store and risk being flattened by another car? But I suppose those people never give it a thought. It's now become almost routine for me when I am walking down the sidewalk and I see a car waiting at the curb cut to enter the thoroughfare for me to walk around the back. Because if I'm coming from the left, they do not look to the left if they're intending, turn the other way, and vice versa. They're just determined to get onto the thoroughfare as quickly as possible, and the possibility that a person may walk in front of their car, because that's what the sidewalks are for, doesn't seem to have entered their mind. Hickman Warrior says, I went to the dentist recently. So dentistry is back on again, is it? Just how severe are the PPP measures? Most U.S. women shouldn't have children, says Matthew Gubbins. Random number generator says, what does happy even mean? Walking around with a soylent grin? Count me out. Well, it's a difficult problem as to what happiness means. I can understand what being content means. As to what being happy means, well, I suppose it differs for different people, and anyone who expects to be happy all the time or most of the time is courting disappointment or worse. Well, hello to Buddy. Cecil Henry says, nothing of diversity is in whites' racial interests. All of it harms whites. Diversity means fewer white people. That's its whole purpose. That's not quite. That's not quite its whole purpose. Another one of its purposes is to transfer the wealth of white people to rent seekers who are not white. That seems to be what all non-white journalism now is, and a great deal of white journalism as well. I have suffered, and I continue to suffer. Do you want to, explain? Well, no, it's not necessary to explain. Or some years ago, people were mean to me at a job. Well, how were they mean to you? Because, in jobs, people experience mean behavior all the time. So can you explain to us how this so-called mean behavior was racially motivated? No, but again, that's not necessary anymore. Fate favors the bold. Fortune favors the bold. And it may be too early to speak definitively of this, but it appears that Prince Harry and Meghan Mertz have won the battle with the British royal family. Despite this, Breitbart reports a poll conducted by the UK's biggest selling newspaper has found a majority of Britons want Harry and Meghan Mertz to be stripped of their titles after what Brexit leader Nigel Farage described as their betrayal of the royal family. The Daily Mail commissioned the survey after the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, as Harry and Meghan are still titled, despite last year stepping back from formal royal life, gave a tell-all interview with Oprah Winfrey, during which a couple implied a member of the royal family was racist, that Meghan was denied mental health support when she felt suicidal, and Harry was financially cut off. The poll conducted by JL Partners found that the majority, 53%, thought the interview was the wrong thing to do, compared to just a third who thought otherwise. The findings are broadly in line with the Monday YouGov poll that found a plurality, 47%, thought it was inappropriate for the couple to do the interview. A higher percentage, 54%, said that Harry and Meghan had let down Queen Elizabeth II by airing their personal grievances on international television. More than half, 51%, agreed that Meghan and Harry's royal titles should be removed, compared to less than a third who disagreed. Now, especially if you, say, look at this website, Harry Markle, you'll find that Harry and Meghan have been planning their Megxit for years. 4 years. You don't set up your own websites, which are owned by you, if you intend to be members of the royal family. You don't talk about, for instance, moving to Botswana or some such. Furthermore, you don't move to Canada, and then you don't move to Los Angeles. But we have seen a failure of nerve in Queen Elizabeth, which is not surprising to me. But this is a failure of nerve, which may end up in the destruction of the British royal family itself. That this is a bullying situation. Meghan claims that she has been bullied, but she is the bully. Here's the thing about bullies. Bullies are the people who are willing to do what others won't. That's why they succeed. That's a lesson that we seem to have lost in all this anti-bullying talk. When it became obvious, 12, 18 months ago, what Harry and Meghan had in mind, they should have been stripped of their titles and HRH, all of it. As Jerry Seinfeld said, right off like a Band-Aid. But nope, can't do that. That might be seen as cruel. Well, how do you think the royal family came into existence in the first time, and how it was sustained? A lot of cruelty involved. It's the nature of the beast. Again, from the Mail, ITV shares slumped the day after Piers Morgan sensationally quit Good Morning Britain in a smash hit final episode, which saw ratings soar. Shares in the broadcaster have plummeted by 4.3% today, despite yesterday's divisive show beating BBC breakfast viewing figures for the first time ever. Experts say the shock departure of ITV's tough-talking morning host, who helped add 1 million new viewers in his time on Good Morning Britain, could have prompted the rapid drop. You think so? The threat of a potential investigation by Ofcom, that's the TV regulator, into Morgan's comments on the show could have sparked panic among investors. I don't think so. Okay. So, did Meghan herself make a complaint? This is from Colby Hall at Mediaite. Was Piers Morgan fired, or did he quit under pressure to apologize? And what role did the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Mertz, play in Morgan's very public departure from Good Morning Britain? CNN's Max Foster is reporting that Markle filed a formal complaint with Good Morning Britain's broadcaster ITV about Morgan's comments that followed her Oprah interview that aired Sunday in the US and Monday in the UK. We do know for a fact that Meghan and Harry are exceedingly litigious. There is a long, drawn-out battle going on with the company which owns the Daily Mail, which many people falsely believe that Harry and Meghan have won. It's not over yet. Essentially, an appeals court judge ruled that the company that owns the Daily Mail would not be allowed to present its case. And I rather think that a subsequent higher appeals court might disagree with that. Foster reported that Markle made a formal complaint directly to ITV, not relating to the personal nature of those attacks, but her concerns about the impact it could have on the seriousness of mental health issues. Effectively, the impact Piers Morgan's attacks could have on others apart from her, effectively the audience here in the United Kingdom. It's never about Meghan. Never, never, never. She's such a selfless person, a living saint. This is a person who accepted designer clothes after she hooked up with Harry, after she was in Kensington Palace, and then flogged them. That's how selfless Meghan is. I don't believe almost anything that comes out of her mouth, Morgan said on Monday about Markle. Look, we know for a fact that suicide talk leads to more suicides. And here we have Meghan boasting about how she considered suicide while she was pregnant with her first child. And now it's all suicide, suicide, suicide in the media, which leads to more suicide. This is a demonstrable fact. This valorizing of suicide is disgusting. It's morally disgusting. And it has grave consequences, particularly for youth. But no, let's just talk about people's hurt feelings. And again, I will mention that it is a curious thing in a day of curious things that it's always seems to be women who are threatening suicide, but overwhelmingly it is men that actually do commit suicide. From the Mail, bring back Piers Morgan, thousands signed petitions to get presenter reinstated and ITV shares dive. Okay. Let's see. We have one petition with 95,000 signatures, and another one with 35,000 signatures. Well, yeah, good for the media. Good for the media. And the celebrities are choosing sides. Let's see. Sharon Osbourne stands with Piers Morgan. I suppose the presenters stick together. Piers Morgan has an awful lot of support, it seems, from British celebrities. And even some non-white ones, which might be a little surprising, but is actually, it cheers one up, you know, that it's not entirely monolithic. But we're all waiting to find out what Jamila Jamil thinks about this. I'll get to that in just a minute. According to Sky News, Piers Morgan calls Meghan's accusations against royals contemptible and a diatribe of bilge. He is not backing down from what he said, as opposed to that Mumford and Sons guy. Piers Morgan's, one of his nicknames was Piers Moron, but we see that in not backing down, he's clearly cleverer than the fellow from Mumford and Sons. The Harry Markle at wordpress.wordpress.com site responds to the response from Buckingham Palace. Very short, terse response. The following statement is issued by Buckingham Palace on behalf of Her Majesty the Queen. The whole family is saddened to learn the full extent of how challenging the last few years have been for Harry and Meghan. Is this how royalty speaks now? The issues raised, particularly that of race, are concerning. I'm surprised the statement doesn't say problematic. While some recollections may vary, in other words, some people may be telling the truth and some people may be lying, they're taken very seriously and will be addressed by the family privately. Harry, Meghan, and Archie will always be much loved family members. Yes. Harry Markle says, some think this was an excellent response and one where Meghan and the cult can't say they were attacked while others expected more. I believe that they knew they had to respond somehow, but with dignity and compassion until further investigations are made. What is clear is that the staff covered up things, protected them, that is to say, Harry and Meghan, and thought they were doing the right thing, but in fact, it was used against them. The problem with this statement is that it acknowledges in part that there may be substance to the claims that the duo make. For many, that is seen as weak. It's very much along the lines of when someone says, with all due respect, we know that they actually disagree, but have to be PC to say that. Then they tackle the allegation of racism, and it's worded not to admit it, but states that conversations may be misinterpreted with an assurance it will be dealt with privately. The race card was what the duo had played on and is what activists used to attack the UK and the royal family. The problem with this statement is that it's all about the royal family and not about the accusations of racism in the nation. She also states that it will be done privately, but it was Harry and Meghan who aired the dirty laundry publicly. In this case, the Queen needs to set her own rules because the duo knew what they were doing in trying to provoke a response that suited their narrative. The fellow who writes this site has been carrying on for some time that the titles have to go and that this issue is slipping away from the royal family. He writes, appeasement never works, and while many are relieved that Buckingham Palace has responded, to me it's nothing more than I've received your message and will reply and address the concerns in due course, which is fine for now. But the men in gray should know that the people expect more and some decent support. Well, you will recall when the Princess of Wales was killed in 1997 in an ugly and stupid fashion, that there was some sort of public uprising with what, tens of millions of flowers encased in plastic sacrificed against walls. Oh yes, the people's princess, queen of our hearts. Oh, and the flag at Buckingham Palace was not flying at half-mast. No, because she was not a member of the royal family. But the Queen gave in to that one, to an attack of mass hysteria. And again, I think it now may be too late for the royal family. There are rumors going back more than a year that Meghan somehow thinks that she can make Prince Harry the next king of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And I thought at the time, well, this bonkers. It's obviously bonkers. Now I don't think it's completely bonkers. I don't. What chance of this happening would I give it? Right now, I'll say 10%. But I think that number could rise. And, oh, here is the latest. Again from the Mail. Queen will reach out to Prince Harry for peace talks. Oh dear. The Queen is to extend a personal olive branch to Harry and Meghan as she takes charge of the fallout from their bombshell television interview. With senior royals still reeling following a series of explosive allegations by the couple, she has issued a 3-line whip to prevent staff discussing the situation publicly. It is understood that she intends to try to pour oil on troubled waters by reaching out to her grandson and his wife in California instead. It is expected they will speak on the phone in the next few days. Although Harry and Meghan were informed of Buckingham Palace's statement on the issue prior to its release Tuesday evening, this was done through officials, but the Queen believes now is the time for a more personal approach. Oh dear. Yes, if you keep on paying the Danegeld, to paraphrase Kipling, you will never get rid of the Mertz. But what are I think that the most important person in this whole affair has to say, and that of course would be Jamila Jamil, who is a woman who has suffered so very, very much, and I'm going to detail this for you because it's pretty shocking. Apparently, this includes persecution by bees. Yes, I know. Here's from page 6 at the New York Post. Jamila Jamil, I almost killed myself over Piers Morgan's lies. And here we have another famous woman, boasting about suicide. Well, you know what I think about that. This is from Leah Bitsky. Jamila Jamil says Piers Morgan's campaign of lies against her almost drove her to suicide last year. I almost killed myself a year ago because of Piers Morgan's relentless campaign of lies and hatred against me. Jamil, 35, tweeted Tuesday. I'm glad I'm still alive today for many reasons. Watching him leave Good Morning Britain today is right up there and has me feeling. Yes, and she provides a GIF on Twitter where she shakes her money makers, because that's, first the suicide, then the shaking of the money makers, and just to show what a highly moral person you are. The Good Place star's revelation came after Morgan resigned from his position at GMB. May we never have to watch minorities have to go on mainstream news and have to defend their right to be treated with dignity and respect ever again, all while being screamed over by this man. Yes, minorities in Britain must never be criticized for anything, despite their behavior. The people with the whip hand in Britain have laid down the law. She also retweeted a news story of Morgan's exit, writing, "Oh my God, is it my birthday again? I hope Alex Beresford replaces his role. What a gent." Jamil, 35, and Morgan, 55, have gone after each other publicly in the past. As Page 6 previously reported, they got into a vicious Twitter feud last year over Caroline Flack, who, wait for it, died by suicide. She wrote, Piers using a dead woman who I was friends with as a weapon to try to create further harassment for me, as I just publicly explained that last week I felt suicidal, is why he is the industry's most problematic. My criticizing a show did not aim any hate at Caroline, she added at the time. No, of course. So a deeply messed up reality show TV personality kills herself after revelations of possibly criminal misbehavior. And guess what? Jamila Jamil has to insert herself into this, because it's not really news, or it's not really true unless Jamila Jamil is personally involved in this. But let's find out more about this delightful woman. In her defense, I must say that this woman is very good looking indeed, with a fine face and an excellent figure. I will give her that. She has some natural talent. Okay. Jamil was born on February 25th, 1986 in Hampstead, London, to a Pakistani father and Indian mother. She stated in 2015 that she was born with congenital hearing loss and labyrinthitis, which she has several operations to correct, and that she had 70% hearing ability in her left ear and 50% in her right ear. At the age of 9, she was diagnosed with hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, a genetic disorder affecting the connective tissue in the body. Jamil also stated that she was diagnosed with celiac disease at age 12. She experienced mercury poisoning at age 21, which she attributes to mercury leakage from amalgam teeth fillings and further exacerbated by the improper removal of them, which she declared burned holes in her digestive system. As a teenager, she suffered from anorexia nervosa and did not eat a full meal between the ages of 14 and 17. She believes her eating disorder developed due to societal pressure, including magazine articles selling weight loss products. She has said that at the age of 17, she was struck by a car while running from a bee, breaking several bones and damaging her spine. She was told that she might never walk again, but slowly recovered after steroid treatment and physiotherapy using a Zimmer frame to start walking. She credits the car accident for pushing her towards recovery from anorexia, saying it changed her relationship with her body. She attended Queen's College School in London, but was unable to complete her A-levels because of her accident. She claimed that she had never worked as a model. I don't know why, but apparently it turns out she later admitted it. And she starts getting hired in 2016 on a bunch of rubbish TV shows and starts appearing in magazines as an expert. And then she gets hired on a show by hitmaker Michael Schur, The Good Place. And and she's a scold. She's one of Britain's foremost scolds. And body image. Women are being wrecked by unsuitable ideas of a proper body image, which is why she's always shaking her moneymakers and appearing in designer clothes. Oh, wait a minute. It gets better. Jamil has been in a relationship with musician James Blake since 2015. She came out as queer after her appointment as a judge of voguing reality series Legendary received backlash, as voguing ball culture is rooted in Black and Latino alphabet people communities in New York. She's queer because, of course, she is. There's no evidence of this, but I'm sure that she is queer in her heart. In interviews, Jamil has mentioned several bee attacks in her life, including being hit by a car at age 17. In 2015, she claimed that while she was interviewing musician Mark Ronson in the Hollywood Hills, the biggest swarm of killer bees she had ever seen made them retreat. Ronson contradicted Jamil's version of events, describing one or two individual bees and walking slowly inside in response. Jamil related that while filming the first season of The Good Place in 2016, she was chased by a dark swarm of bees and again got hit by a car. In 2019, Jamil states that she ran away from bees while crossing the road to the UN headquarters to give a speech. In several UK interviews in 2013, as well as one in 2018 on Good Morning America, Jamil stated that she lost a tooth, smashed her nose, broke her elbow and several ribs, and got a concussion when she slipped and fell on her face while running around the set with Ollie Murs. Okay. Oh, wait. In an interview on Hard Talk, because Hard Talk is exactly the kind of show that won't expect Jamila Jamil to be on, she stated that she had been raped several times in her life, and then in the past she looked at blaming women, but has changed to blaming this societal patriarchy that produces that scenario. 2015, she mentioned that she left BBC Radio 1's official chart show because of a breast cancer scare. Okay, and it goes on and on and on. Jamila Jamil becomes livid when it is suggested that she is a serial liar. But you know that hearing loss from birth is associated with low intelligence. She does not appear to be a woman of low intelligence, and the number of what genetic disasters and other disasters that she has suffered in her life, one could hardly believe that a woman so ill-favored by nature could be so good looking. But perhaps she's just lucky in that regard. Let's take a look at the chat. Ogan's Iron says there is a surprising fraction of women who have a very odd relationship with truth. LOL, enter the vehicle noises. Yes, says Adolf Himmler. Yes, I guess that's that Jamila Jamil being persecuted eternally by bees. They were murder hornets, says Bob Paxson. Killer bees have not yet reached Los Angeles. Am I right about this? What is it with this BIPOC people and their beta bearded soy men? Halper says this reads like a Mel Brooks movie. No more annual car show in Kevin's city due to bike lanes organizer claims. There's a photo of her with a white soy boyfriend, not making that up. Autistic too, probably. She has every advantage. Indeed, she does, but she just never stops complaining. Of course, similarly, when Christy Teigen, I believe that's her name, how her name is pronounced, decided to make another mixed race woman, decided to make a public spectacle of her miscarriage or stillbirth with pictures in the hospital bed. Guess who stepped up to say, I had a miscarriage too, you know. Yeah, look at me, look at me, look at me too. Why, that would be Megan Mertz, wouldn't it? The mimesis of these women is really something to behold. Well, everyone else was doing it. Oh, and here's another story from the Mail. Right-wing provocateur Milo Greek name has declared himself ex-gay and sodomy-free and said he wants to rehabilitate conversion therapy, as he called transsexuals demonic, and vowed to devote himself to the Catholic Church. The 36-year-old, who became the poster boy for the alt-right due to his misogynistic, racist, and homophobic rants, claimed he is no longer gay and likened homosexuality to addiction and being an alcoholic 3 years after he wed his boyfriend in Hawaii. Greek name told LifeSite he plans to dedicate the next 10 years to reviving the widely banned practice of conversion therapy that aims to forcibly change an individual's sexual orientation. That's not what it does, gender identity or gender expression, claiming it does work. The British expat, who once endorsed sex between younger boys and older men, fanned the flames of anti-alphabet people sentiment once again by hitting out at the terror of transsexuals and saying, I can't repeat this on YouTube. Yiannopoulos told the right-wing website that he wasn't entirely joking when he said he became gay to annoy his mom and questioned how anyone could be wholly at home in the gay lifestyle. I'll just comment that his claim that he became gay, he wasn't entirely joking when he became gay to annoy his mom. I would say that there are likely many such cases. Okay, so do they have the original LifeSite article here? I have been warning against Milo Greek name for years and years and years in years. 6, actually. That I believe I called him the intersectional alt-right Andrew Sullivan back in 2015. I don't, I'm reminded of a conversation that once occurred in a newsroom I worked in. And what about, men who have made conversions? And I had objected to someone who was making bank in BC by telling tales of his horrific life as a petty criminal, beating people up for money, essentially. But now he had seen the light, and then he gave, lectures, paid lectures, explaining, talking about his terrible, terrible life. And I'm sure all the women are, oh no, oh dear. Yes, and now he was dispensing advice. And someone in the newsroom, a Christian, said that, well, what about St. Paul after his Damascene conversion? And another Christian in the newsroom pointed out that it was 17 years after St. Paul's Damascene conversion that he began to speak of Christianity in public. 17 years. And so Milo is going straight to it. The original story here from LifeSite News, which is an excellent website, by the way, is by Doug Mainwaring. He is leading a daily consecration to St. Joseph online. St. Joseph is the patron saint of Canada, by the way. 2 years ago, when church militant Michael Voris famously challenged a Greek name to live a chaste life, he was not defensive. Instead, he acquiesced and humbly admitted his human weakness. I know everything you're saying, and I'm just not there yet, and I don't know if I'll get there, he told Voris at the time. Voris is a former homosexual himself. LifeSite asked, I imagine that to many who follow you, your recent decision to publicly identify as Milo X gay may seem like a 180-degree turn. Are you also surprised that your life has taken this turn, or is it unsurprising, a natural and perhaps inevitable progression in your life? I ask this because over the last few years, things that you've said have hinted at being drawn in this direction. He says, who I was never wholly at home, who could be, and only leaned into it heavily in public because it drove liberals crazy to see a handsome, charismatic, intelligent gay man riotously celebrating conservative principles. That is such a grotesque contradiction in terms. Why would he repeat such nonsense now? He continues, that's not to say I didn't throw myself enthusiastically into degeneracy of all kinds in my private life. I suppose I felt that's all I deserved. I'd love to say that it was all an act and that I've been straight this whole time, but even I don't have that kind of commitment to performance art. Talk about method acting. LifeSite asks, was there any event or series of events that triggered your decision to become sodomy-free and to do so publicly? Did God knock you off your horse as he did Saul, who became Paul, of course? Or did it come about some other way? Please explain. Milo says, 4 years ago, I gave an interview to America Magazine, which they declined to print. And America Magazine is a magazine you should decline to read because it is heretical rubbish. It's taken me a long time to live up to the claims I made in that interview, but I am finally doing it. Anyone who's read me closely over the past decade must surely have seen this coming. I wasn't shy about dropping hints in my New York Times best-selling book, Dangerous. I heavily hinted that I might be coming out as straight in the future. And in my recent Stream of Consciousness Telegram feed, I've even been more explicit, stomach-churningly so. I've always thought of myself as a Jack Bauer sort of figure. Yes. I think that Milo Greek name turns to lead everything that he touches. He may be entirely sincere. I suppose we shall see about this. In his favor, I suppose, his downfall began, of course, when he talked about, man-boy love, was what they used to call it. According to the Mail, in 2017, Greek name said in an interview that younger boys could find a relationship with an older man quite beneficial, and said consent is not black and white. The whole consent thing is not as black and white as people try to paint it. There are certainly people who are capable of giving consent at a younger age. I would certainly consider myself to be one of them, people who are sexually active younger. People are messy and complex, particularly in the homosexual world. Some of those relationships between younger boys and older men, the sort of coming-of-age relationships, the relationships in which those older men help those younger boys to discover who they are and give them security and safety and provide them with love and a reliable rock where they can't speak to their parents. Okay. See, what destroyed him was this is in-group speech, which he gave to the out-group. And that is forbidden. This kind of talk is rife. It's simply a commonplace amongst homosexuals, but you don't talk to the straights that way because they might begin to derive certain unpleasant conclusions from that. For instance, oh yes, the conversion narrative that these people tend to say, I always knew that I was gay from age X, right? How did you know that already? Was it a question of being more comfortable with female things or whatever, something like that? But then, okay, so what was your first experience, sexual experience with a man? How old were you? How old was he? And no, we're not allowed to talk about that. You're not allowed to talk about that, despite, incredibly, the Catholic pervert priest scandal. Yes, what we know about this, and what is documented, for instance, in the John Jay report. No. No, this apparently has something to do with celibacy, as if the Anglican Church is not racked by homosexual sex scandals on a regular basis. I'm going to reserve judgment on Milo Greek Name's conversion. I certainly hope that it is real. But this is a man who finds himself always needing to be outrageous. That if he were not so, if he were not the object of, I don't know, people saying, "Oh, isn't he great? Isn't he horrible?" These very radical opinions for or against, and also, they look at me. One wonders whether he, a great part of his whole appeal, which so many conservatives, so-called, fell for, which is one of the reasons why you should never trust them, is, well, the gay conservative syndrome. Oh, well, that doesn't have anything to do with anything else. Yes, it does. Yes, indeed, it does. Because the gay is not the same as homosexual. What the gay movement is revolutionary. It teaches that is the most important thing about them, the most important thing by far. So when these same people say, "Oh, I'm gay, but it doesn't affect anything else in my life," they are lying to you. So let's see if Milo manages to butch it up somewhat. If he manages to stop being so outrageous. Just look back at the stories from 3, 4, 5 years ago of, oh, here's Milo acting like a drag queen. And, oh, doesn't that make conservatism such an inclusive movement? No, what it does is make it a ridiculous movement. We're getting close to the end here. This is pretty horrifying from Breitbart, Francis Martel. China urges the World Health Organization to let it run global vaccine passport system. As always, what could possibly go wrong? Let's let the movements of everyone on Earth be controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. There is an excellent piece in the Federalist by Willis Krumholtz and Robert Delahunty. The real COVID nursing home scandal is why Cuomo and other Democrats did it. Amid Governor Cuomo's sexual harassment allegations and the scandal over his administration hiding the disgustingly high number of nursing home and group home deaths, few are talking about the elephant in the room. The big scandal isn't that Cuomo is a creep, because everyone knew that already. The scandal isn't even that Cuomo lied about nursing home deaths. The real scandal is what lay behind the high nursing home deaths in New York and a handful of other states led by leftist governors such as Michigan's Gretchen Whitmer, Minnesota's Tim Walz, and Pennsylvania's Tom Wolf. It is the story of how grandpa and grandma got tossed away for money. The high nursing home deaths were the direct result of policies that quickly discharged elderly or disabled COVID-19 patients from the hospital when they were still COVID possible and then put them back in group or nursing homes. The hospital lobby directly engineered this approach, and these governors obliged. The stated reason for the policy was concern about hospital capacity, but these states kept the policy well after COVID hospitalizations peaked in April. In states like Minnesota, the policy remained in place, even though the healthcare system never faced the strain that was initially feared. What you don't hear is that hospitals didn't want to keep Medicare and Medicaid patients, especially Medicaid patients, in hospitals for too long, because longer stays with such patients are less profitable. In New York, Michigan, New Jersey, Minnesota, and Pennsylvania, nursing homes were required or encouraged to admit COVID-positive patients. These patients then spread the disease to the rest of the residents, and group and nursing homes became epicenters for COVID-19 cases and deaths. Leftists try to brush the logic aside, but a report found a direct correlation between patients discharged by hospitals and COVID-19 cases. In Cuomo's New York, at the height of the pandemic on March 25th, the state health department compelled nursing homes to accept patients who had tested positive for coronavirus. The policy was pushed by the nonprofit Hospital Association, the Greater New York Hospital Association. New York had recently cut Medicaid funding due to budget issues, and given Medicaid is already chronically underfunded, it is possible that hospitals were losing money or at best barely breaking even on poor and indigent COVID-19 patients. Later, Cuomo's aides inserted a measure into an annual budget bill, creating the nation's most generous and explicit COVID lawsuit protections for healthcare and industry officials. One study claims that COVID-19 deaths were 7.5 times higher in states with such corporate legal immunity. The GNYHA is one of the most influential forces in New York politics. Cuomo received $1 million from it in his re-election campaign, and the donation was engineered to remain secret until after his inauguration. Overall, during Cuomo's second term, his campaign and his state party committee raked in more than $2.3 million from hospital donors. Essentially, elderly New Yorkers were sacrificed for profit. But no, apparently it's the inappropriate behavior, the conversations and the like, that is the real problem here. And here's a story from, I won't mention the site, but it's been reported elsewhere. 2 nuns in northern Kentucky died after receiving the first dose of an mRNA-based vaccine against the Wuhan coronavirus. Now, most nuns, as you may know, are quite old indeed. But the point is that this congregation of nuns, the 32 of them, they shut themselves off from the world when coronavirus started up, and they opened themselves up to the world. When the vaccine appeared, 28 of them tested positive for COVID-19, and so far 2 of them have died at the monastery. And let's end with Minneapolis. Has it burst into flames yet? This is from the Star Tribune. In Minneapolis, communities of color brace for fresh wave of trauma as Derek Chauvin goes on trial in George Floyd's death. So, help me complete this here. How do we get from A to B here? That a career criminal apprehended while committing a crime and high as a kite on fentanyl, an extremely dangerous drug, he dies in police custody. And this has inflicted a wave of trauma on all of the members of communities of color in Minneapolis. And by communities of color, that would mean what? Various Asian peoples as well, Native American people. They're all traumatized by George Floyd's death. This is the planted axiom here, that all the non-white people of America, and apparently Canada too, were so traumatized by the death of this career criminal and drug addict that this excuses all of the behavior that took place and the murderous rhetoric now routinely directed at white people. Well, I'm not buying it, but I suppose in these days we can meme anything into existence, except the whole Kamala Mamala thing. That's just not going to fly. Final look at the chat here before I sign off for the day. Reparations, yes. Hickman Warrior says Floyd did some hardcore porn, still online. Nature abhors the elderly and infirm, says Brandon Smith. Oakens Iron says KMG, Steve Saylor stuck on the huge death spike in April 20. Maybe what happened, neglect of very old, sick people results very quickly in lots of deaths, not just COVID neglect too. Well, the figures we've seen are pretty shocking in that regard. I mean, it would seem, well, based on figures from England and Wales, that about a quarter of all of those people who have been diagnosed with COVID-19 in England and Wales, about a quarter have got it from regular life. That is to say, they didn't get it from hospitals and they didn't get it from nursing homes. That, to me, is a very significant statistic. Kevin, what did you think of Stephen Frear's film, The Queen? I do not watch any films about the royal family for lots of reasons. I'm not a particular fan of the royal family. But more to the point, we know very little that is true, that we can say to be true about the royal family. It's a secretive organization. There's a whole infrastructure built around it of gossip magazines and the like, and of royal reporters. How much any things that these people say is true, we don't know, and it can't be proved. It's always been amusing to me that the supposed last words of, I believe it was George V, were bugger bognor. But maybe it happened, maybe it didn't. So, tomorrow is Theatre Thursday, and I will be talking about a comedy from 2011 from Ireland, directed by John Michael McDonough, and it's called The Guard. And on the book club on Friday, I will be talking about a book that I finished yesterday by Matthew Hungoltz-Hetling. And it's nice to know that there's still some actual reporting going on in America. Instead of just, I have suffered, everyone listen to me, I have demands. It's about libertarians and New Hampshire and bears. And it is called A Libertarian Walks into a Bear, and I enjoyed it a great deal. A great deal. So I will be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. If you like the show or any part of it, I would appreciate it if you click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not done so already. If you would like to make a donation to this live stream, which honestly I could really greatly use right now, my PayPal account is linked to Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. Once again, Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. If you're in Canada, donations to my live stream can be made directly via Interac at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And as always, I leave you with this. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuinely human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.